Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the peculiar world of Victorian insomnia cures. Imagine it, candlelit rooms, grand beds draped in velvet, and people tossing and turning, unable to catch a wink. Yes, despite all their societal advancements and the lavish lifestyle many led, Victorians struggled with sleep almost as much as we do today. You probably won't survive this without a chuckle or two, as we explore the bizarre ways they tried to tackle sleepless nights. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Victorian society was a world of contradictions. On one hand, they were pioneers in medicine and innovation, but on the other, their approach to sleep often bordered on the absurd. Despite their scientific knowledge, their understanding of sleep was more rooted in tradition than modern theory. Insomnia was rampant among both the working class and the aristocracy, though for very different reasons. While the working class struggled with long hours and poor conditions, the upper class's trouble with sleep often came from too much leisure and, let's face it, a touch of overindulgence. Historians still argue whether the causes of sleep deprivation during the Victorian era were mostly psychological, stress and anxiety from rapid industrialization, or whether they were a consequence of too much rich food and excess. One thing's for sure though, sleep aids became a booming industry. The wealthy, ever on the lookout for the next trend, turned to tonics, potions, and the occasional miracle cure in a bottle to help them sleep. And if you think you've heard of some strange remedies, just wait until you hear about the sleeping drafts that people were consuming. Now, let's talk about one of the most bizarre solutions the Victorians had for their sleepless nights: the rise of sleep tonics. Imagine this: after a long day of social engagements or business dealings, a Victorian would settle into their plush armchair, pour themselves a drink, and down a potion meant to lull them into slumber. But not just any drink. These tonics were potent mixes of alcohol, opiates, and sometimes even cannabis. Yep, you heard that right. The Victorians didn't shy away from a good dose of the things that would make modern doctors cringe. Historians still debate whether these sleep tonics were actually effective in the long run, or if they just made people more dependent on their magic elixirs. It's a tricky thing to gauge. While some swear by them, saying they help them sleep through the night, others claim that these potions were more about numbing the pain of a hectic, high-strung society. One of the most popular sleep tonics was laudanum, a mixture of opium and alcohol. Just a spoonful could send you to sleep quicker than you could say, insomnia cure. But here's the kicker. While laudanum was available to nearly everyone, it was especially popular among the middle and upper classes, who had the time and resources to indulge in these remedies. So if you were a wealthy Victorian, you might have a bedside table stocked with bottles of these concoctions. Picture it. You reach for your nightcap and then sip on some soothing opium-laced liquid before drifting off to sleep. Sounds oddly cozy, right? But, of course, like most cozy things in Victorian society, it was deeply problematic. The truth is, these tonics didn't exactly cure insomnia, they just masked the problem. It was a temporary fix to a much deeper societal issue, one that many Victorians couldn't quite put their finger on. Was it the stresses of urban life? The fast pace of industrialization? Or was it just the sheer weight of societal expectations? Either way, these sleep tonics became a regular part of Victorian life, and while they might not have helped much in the long run, they sure made for some interesting stories, and some even more interesting sleep patterns. Let's talk about one particular sleep remedy that captured the Victorian imagination: the infamous sleeping draught. If you thought the tonics were a bit much, wait until you hear about this concoction. Picture it. You're a Victorian aristocrat, lying in your plush four-poster bed, and you can't seem to get a wink of sleep. What do? Well, you call for the famous sleeping draught, of course. This delightful mix was essentially a cocktail of opium and alcohol, sometimes with a dash of something else to add an extra punch. A few swigs and, voila, you'd be in dreamland faster than you can say, counting sheep. But here's the thing. The sleeping draft wasn't exactly a one-size-fits-all solution. People had to take it in just the right amounts. Too little and it did nothing. Too much and you'd wake up with a severe hangover, or worse, never wake up at all. Historians still debate whether this cure was actually a lifesaver for the exhausted Victorians or just an early form of dangerous self-medication. The fact that many people survived these drafts is a testament to the sheer willpower of the Victorian spirit, or perhaps just the luck of the draw. Either way, these tonics became so popular that they were sold in pharmacies across the empire, with no prescription necessary. Anyone could buy them, and many did. Imagine what it must have been like to live in a time when taking a spoonful of opium before bed was completely normal. The line between cure and dependency was so thin that it was practically invisible. And for the wealthy who had the means to indulge in this nightly ritual, the draft became a kind of luxury. In fact, the very act of preparing it and drinking it became a comforting nightly ritual in itself. Something to look forward to, even if it didn't truly solve the deeper issues of restlessness. But here's a funny twist. While opium was the go-to drug for sleep, some people found other ways to get their shut-eye. Lavender, for example, was a favored alternative, though it wasn't quite as potent. So, while some Victorians opted for the heavy-handed approach, others preferred a gentler touch, choosing to fill their pillows with lavender, hoping it would be the key to a peaceful night. Now, let's take a strange turn, because the Victorians were all about strange when it came to sleep cures. Picture this. You're lying in bed, struggling to drift off, when suddenly your doctor suggests something you never would have guessed. Electricity. Yes, you heard that right. Victorians, in their quest to conquer insomnia, actually started using electricity to treat sleeplessness. Imagine receiving an electric shock before bed, all in the name of rest. Sounds like a nightmare, right? But in the late 19th century, this was considered one of the more modern treatments. The idea came from the emerging field of electrotherapy, which was believed to stimulate the nervous system and promote relaxation. Some sleep specialists of the time thought that applying small electric currents to certain parts of the body would help soothe the restless soul and calm the mind. It was a bizarre form of therapy, with patients literally getting shocked in an effort to put them to sleep. Picture a Victorian patient, lying back in their bed, holding a pair of metal rods while electricity coursed through their body. Not exactly the most restful way to end your day, is it? Historians still argue whether this treatment was more of a placebo effect or if it actually helped some people. The idea of using electricity to treat sleep issues might seem laughable to us now, but at the time it was cutting-edge science. Some people swore by it, claiming that the gentle shocks helped them sleep better than ever. Others, however, were less enthusiastic, feeling more anxious than relaxed after their electric sessions. Either way, it's a testament to the lengths the Victorians would go to in order to solve their insomnia problems, even if it meant shocking themselves into a peaceful slumber. But the use of electricity didn't stop at the therapy room. In fact, the idea of electrical devices for health and wellness was taking off at the time, with everything from electric bathtubs to electric belts promised to cure everything from back pain to, well, sleeplessness. It was the dawn of the science-based wellness industry, and oh, how far we've come since then. As the Victorian era progressed, the world of sleep specialists grew more populated with all kinds of eccentric and often puzzling figures. These weren't just your average doctors. They were often, shall we say, specialists in the peculiar art of bedtime remedies. There was even a time when people called upon these sleep experts to come into their homes and perform elaborate, sometimes downright strange rituals to help them rest. These sleep specialists didn't just deal with insomnia in the conventional sense. No, they were part of a growing trend of quasi-medical practitioners who offered everything from calming oils to nervous tonics, and even sleep spells designed to induce a state of calm. These specialists would sit with their patients, sometimes for hours, gently talking them through relaxation techniques or reading soothing poetry. Others, in more dramatic cases, would prescribe more hands-on treatments, such as wrapping the patient in blankets or having them soak in herbal baths. One of the more bizarre practices included sleep coaches who would instruct their clients on how to position themselves in bed for the best results. The advice was often contradictory: lie on your left side one day, on your right the next. But to a Victorian who had the time and means to try anything, these treatments seemed worth a shot. Many of these specialists worked with people of the upper class, who had the resources and leisure time to indulge in such unconventional solutions. But let's not be too quick to judge. Historians still argue whether the treatments actually had any lasting effects on the patients, or if they were more about providing the illusion of control over a problem that was, in many ways, much deeper. You see, the more these remedies flourished, the more it became clear that the real problem wasn't necessarily insomnia, but the lifestyle pressures of the time. The rapid pace of industrialization, societal expectations, and a growing obsession with success. Sleep, it seemed, was just another casualty of a rapidly changing world. Let's now take a look at one of the most celebrated sleep aids of the Victorian era: lavender. This humble herb, often found in gardens and hanging in the closets of every home, became the Victorian wonder herb for all things relaxation. In fact, it was considered so potent that if you walked into any Victorian bedroom, you'd likely find a bundle of dried lavender tucked into a pillow, hanging above the bed, or placed neatly in a small sachet. Lavender wasn't just for smell, though. It was part of a growing trend of natural remedies. A gentle whiff of its soothing scent was believed to calm the nerves, ease the mind, and help the body slip into slumber with ease. The Victorians were very much into aromatherapy, even if they didn't call it that. They believed the aroma of lavender helped balance the body's energies, making it one of the most trusted natural remedies of the time. Now, historians still argue whether the effects of lavender were more psychological than physiological. Was it the simple act of a relaxing ritual that allowed the mind to wind down? Or did the plant's oils have some real calming effects on the brain? While we may never know, one thing is certain: the Victorians loved their lavender, and it's easy to see why. It was cheap, readily available, and didn't involve any dangerous chemicals or potentially addictive substances like opium. In a world full of potent elixirs and extreme therapies, lavender offered a quiet, peaceful alternative. But here's the twist: while lavender was loved by many, it was not always the miracle cure people thought it to be. In fact, some people who were heavy users of lavender began to report that their sleep problems were simply being masked, not solved. Lavender's true power, it seems, was more in its ability to calm the mind and set the stage for sleep rather than providing a lasting cure for insomnia. Now, let's move into the realm of bedtime rituals, where things start to get really strange. For the Victorians, sleep wasn't just about crawling into bed and closing their eyes. Oh no. It was an elaborate affair, complete with pre-bedtime routines that could rival the most drawn-out spa treatments. These rituals were meant to prepare both the body and mind for a perfect night's sleep, and they involved some rather peculiar steps. One of the most common practices was the soothing bath. But forget your quick evening shower. The Victorian bath was an event. People would soak for hours, often in water infused with herbs, oils, and other soothing ingredients meant to calm the nerves and ease tension. Imagine lounging in a fragrant bath, lit only by candlelight, with a few drops of lavender or rose water in the mix. It sounds dreamy, doesn't it? But, in reality, this was just one of many steps in their lengthy preparation for sleep. After the bath, they'd often take a glass of warm milk or herbal tea before retiring to bed, further enhancing the sleepiness. And let's not forget about the importance of the perfect nightgown. In the upper echelons of society, nightwear was a statement. Victorian sleepwear, especially for women, was an intricate affair. Think lace, satin, and layers upon layers of fabric. The idea was that if you were going to sleep, you might as well do it in style. For men, however, it was all about comfort, loose-fitting flannel nightshirts that allowed for the best possible sleep posture, or at least that's what they thought. Historians still debate whether these extensive rituals were an attempt to ensure quality sleep, or if they were just part of the culture's obsession with control and luxury. After all, the Victorians were living through a time of extreme change, and sleep offered them a moment of refuge from the chaos of industrialization and societal expectations. But one thing's for sure, these rituals were deeply ingrained in their daily lives. So, as odd as they seem, the lengths Victorians went to in order to prepare for sleep were rooted in a desire for tranquility, and perhaps a bit of indulgence too. Now, as we venture deeper into the realm of sleep, let's take a look at the luxurious sleep environments that the Victorians meticulously crafted. For the upper class, sleep wasn't just a necessity, it was an indulgence, a sanctuary. Victorian bedrooms were the epitome of opulence and comfort, designed to ensure the deepest, most restful slumber possible. The wealthy spared no expense in creating the perfect sleeping environment, with every detail carefully considered. It all started with the bed itself. These weren't just any beds. They were massive four-poster structures draped in heavy, rich fabrics like velvet and brocade. The canopies often hung with heavy curtains, allowing the sleeper to shut out the world entirely. The larger the bed, the more prestigious it was. Bigger was certainly better when it came to sleep. You'd find these beds topped with layers of pillows. So many pillows, in fact, that it was common for a Victorian to sleep practically sitting up, buried in a mountain of cushions. To some, the sheer amount of fabric and pillows was a sign of wealth and status. But the luxury didn't stop at the bed. Victorian bedroom decor was all about creating a serene, almost dreamlike atmosphere. Delicate lace curtains fluttered in the breeze, while the walls were adorned with intricate wallpaper patterns. The floors, if they weren't covered in thick rugs, were often made of polished wood that reflected the warm glow of the candlelight. You could imagine walking into one of these rooms, where the air smelled faintly of lavender, the bed was inviting, and every element seemed to be whispering, "Rest, relax, sleep." Historians still argue whether these lavish sleeping environments were a reflection of the Victorian obsession with luxury and appearance, or if they were genuinely meant to create the ideal atmosphere for sleep. The wealthier classes had the time and resources to devote to their personal comfort, and sleep in many ways became a form of self-care, a way to show that you had the means to escape the worries of the day. Of course, not everyone had access to such lavish bedrooms. For the working class, the struggle for restful sleep was much more real and much less glamorous. Now, let's delve into a topic that's near and dear to many a Victorian's heart: the mattress. As odd as it might sound, the mattress was a centerpiece in the luxurious Victorian bedroom, and believe it or not, it was evolving into the modern version we know today. Back in the day, mattresses were far from the cushy, soft surfaces we enjoy now. They were a far cry from memory foam or plush pillow-top mattresses. In fact, early Victorian mattresses were more akin to glorified sacks filled with hay, feathers, or straw. While not the most comfortable, they were still an upgrade from previous sleeping arrangements. The real shift came in the mid-Victorian period when innovation hit the mattress market. Manufacturers began to incorporate coil springs into the design, a game-changer that brought a whole new level of comfort to the upper class. The sprung mattress was born, and with it, the modern mattress as we know it today began to take shape. These new mattresses were filled with a combination of materials, including cotton, horsehair, and even the occasional layer of down feathers for added softness. The goal was to create a sleep surface that supported the body better, rather than simply sinking into a bed of loose materials. Of course, only the wealthy could afford such innovations at first. The price of these mattresses was high, and for many the idea of spending money on a fancy, spring-filled mattress seemed extravagant. But for those who could afford it, the sprung mattress became a status symbol, a mark of refinement and luxury. This was the period when sleeping for the wealthy became less about mere rest and more about indulging in comfort and creating an environment of absolute peace. Historians still debate the significance of the sprung mattress. Was it merely a material innovation, or did it symbolize something deeper, like the shift in Victorian society from an era of hard labor to one of leisure and self-care? One thing's for sure. The evolution of the mattress was as much about the changing social structure as it was about the quest for better sleep. The introduction of electric lighting in Victorian homes, and specifically the rise of the electric lamp, marks a crucial turning point in how sleep patterns were affected during the era. Before the advent of electric lights, the world was governed by natural daylight and the soft glow of candles or gas lamps. People's sleep schedules were much more in tune with the natural rhythms of the day, rising with the sun and retiring after the setting of dusk. But with the arrival of electric light in the late 19th century, everything changed. For the first time, Victorians could stay up well into the night without the inconvenience of trying to keep a flame burning. Imagine being able to read a book, write letters, or host social gatherings long past what would have been the usual time to go to bed. It was revolutionary, and the Victorians, ever eager to embrace the newest technologies, were quick to adapt. However, as we all know, there's a price for progress. The real question historians still debate is whether electric lighting played a role in the growing problem of insomnia in the Victorian era. The ability to stay up later and later disrupted natural sleep patterns. People were no longer forced to wind down when the sun went down, and the act of going to bed no longer had the calming, natural rhythm it once had. The psychological effects of this shift in sleeping habits weren't fully understood at the time, but we now know that exposure to artificial light late at night can interfere with the production of melatonin, the hormone that helps regulate sleep. Yet, for many, the introduction of electric light was seen as an undeniable benefit. It allowed them to work longer hours, read more, and entertain guests in the comfort of their own homes. It wasn't until much later that society began to realize the long-term effects of disrupting the natural circadian rhythm. For the Victorians, though, electric lighting was a sign of modernity, progress that promised more than just brighter rooms but a brighter future. But as we'll see, this brighter future came with a few unintended consequences. As we move deeper into the peculiar realm of Victorian sleep, let's touch on something often overlooked: nervous exhaustion. You might not immediately associate the Victorians with mental health concerns, but during the Industrial Revolution, the pressure to keep up with the rapidly changing world took a massive toll on the psyche. As the hustle and bustle of the cities intensified, so too did the anxiety and stress that many Victorians experienced. The concept of nervous exhaustion became more prevalent, and people were actively seeking ways to calm their frayed nerves, especially when it came to getting a good night's rest. The upper classes, with their many social obligations and intricate schedules, were particularly susceptible to this condition. The pressure to maintain appearances, attend endless social events, and live up to societal expectations was overwhelming. Add to that the stress of living in a rapidly urbanizing world, and it's no wonder that many found themselves tossing and turning at night. Nervous exhaustion was so common that it became a standard excuse for many sleepless nights. Interestingly, Victorians didn't just turn to the usual sleep tonics or lavender sachets. Instead, they often sought out what we would now recognize as self-care methods, though perhaps in a more regimented, less holistic way. This included long periods of solitude, extended baths, and even hypnosis. Yes, hypnosis. The idea was to put the exhausted mind into a deeply relaxed state, in the hopes of drifting off into peaceful sleep. Historians still debate whether nervous exhaustion was simply a Victorian term for what we now call anxiety, or if it was a distinct condition in its own right. Some believe it was a reaction to the era's rapid technological and social changes, while others argue it was a direct result of poor sleep habits. Regardless of the cause, it was clear that the Victorians were struggling with a form of mental fatigue that modern society is only beginning to understand. And yet, through it all, they continued to search for remedies that would bring them relief, even if it meant indulging in the strangest and most eccentric treatments. As we continue our exploration of Victorian sleep cures, Let's talk about a rather dangerous turn the quest for rest took: the rise of sleeping pills. While tonics, baths, and lavender were all popular, they were far from the only remedies people tried. By the late 19th century, pharmaceutical companies were churning out a new kind of sleep aid: sleeping pills. These pills weren't the modern, carefully controlled pharmaceuticals we know today. No, these were far more potent and often more dangerous. The first widely used sleeping pills were barbiturates, which were synthesized in the 1860s. These pills were considered the ultimate solution for insomnia: quick, easy, and effective. You could just pop a pill and drift off to sleep without the fuss of long rituals or tinctures. For the wealthy, it was a simple and efficient way to get the rest they craved. But as with many quick-fix solutions, there was a dark side. The problem with these pills wasn't just their potency, it was their addictive nature. And here's where things get a little frightening. Many people didn't understand the addictive properties of these early sleeping pills, which led to widespread misuse. Some people took them night after night, while others experimented with higher doses in an attempt to achieve deeper, longer sleep. It wasn't long before people were dependent on these pills to get through the night. Historians still debate the long-term effects of these early sleeping pills. Were they simply an unfortunate part of Victorian medicine, or did they signal the beginning of a dangerous trend in pharmaceuticals? While the pills might have seemed like a quick fix to those struggling with insomnia, they didn't solve the underlying problem. In fact, they often made matters worse. Victorians who used sleeping pills were no longer relying on the rituals of lavender or the soothing comfort of a cozy bedroom. Instead, they were turning to a chemical solution, a temporary escape from their sleeplessness, but not a cure. The story of the Victorian sleeping pill is a stark reminder of the dangers of chasing quick fixes without understanding the potential consequences. Now, let's turn our attention to a fascinating but often overlooked aspect of Victorian sleep: the impact of the Industrial Revolution on sleep patterns. As the world shifted from agrarian to industrial, the demands of work and life underwent a radical transformation. The rapid rise of factories, the expansion of cities, and the increasingly mechanized work environment created a new set of challenges for the Victorian workforce, and for their sleep. Before industrialization, most people worked with the natural rhythms of the day. Farmers, for example, rose with the sun, worked during the day, and rested when the sun set. But with the advent of the factory system, people were suddenly working long, regimented hours, often well into the evening, and their schedules became completely disconnected from the natural cycle of light and dark. This disruption of the natural sleep-wake cycle is something we now know as shift work disorder. But for the Victorians, it was simply an unfortunate side effect of industrial progress. The working class suffered the most, with many individuals working 12-hour shifts in dimly lit factories, only to return home to poorly ventilated, crowded living conditions. It's no wonder that sleep became an elusive goal for so many. But even the wealthier classes, who had the luxury of leisure, found themselves struggling. The social pressures of the time, keeping up with social events, maintaining status, and engaging in endless polite conversations, meant that sleep was often sacrificed in favor of societal expectations. A Victorian could hardly be seen to sleep too much when there was so much to accomplish, whether in business, at social events, or in one's personal life. Historians still argue whether the rise of industrialization truly had a long-lasting impact on sleep, or whether it was more of a gradual shift that became more noticeable as technology advanced. Regardless of the debate, it's clear that the industrial world created a new set of challenges for people trying to get a restful night's sleep. With factory machines running day and night, the notion of good rest became increasingly out of reach for the working classes. By now, we've seen how sleep practices in the Victorian era were influenced by everything from the rise of the electric lamp to the growing pressure of industrialization. But what happened when the Victorians finally started to understand that sleep, like any other biological process, needed to be studied scientifically? Enter the dawn of sleep research. As bizarre as some of the treatments may have been, The late 19th century also saw the first forays into understanding sleep from a medical and psychological perspective. One of the key figures in early sleep research was Sir William Osler, a Canadian physician often referred to as the father of modern medicine. Osler was one of the first to suggest that sleep was not just an inevitable consequence of the body's need for rest, but rather a critical process that could be understood, regulated, and even studied. Before this, the Victorian approach to sleep was more rooted in superstition, cultural practices, or sheer trial and error. But Osler and others began to lay the groundwork for a more scientific understanding of sleep disorders, even if they didn't fully grasp all the nuances. The idea of studying sleep was a new frontier. Osler and his contemporaries began to see sleep as a vital part of the body's function, not just an inconvenient pause in the hustle of life. They examined how the body's nervous system interacted with rest and sleep, and they began to identify that problems like insomnia might be linked to stress, diet, or even the rapid changes in the Victorian lifestyle. However, as groundbreaking as these early studies were, there were still many unanswered questions about sleep, many of which we are only now beginning to answer with modern technology. Historians debate whether these early investigations into sleep were truly revolutionary or just a step in a longer journey towards understanding. What's clear, though, is that the shift in how the Victorians viewed sleep, and the growing awareness that it wasn't just something you could wish away with lavender or opium, was a significant milestone. It marked the beginning of sleep moving from the realm of folklore and guesswork into the realm of science. As we wrap up our journey through the curious case of Victorian insomnia cures, let's take a moment to reflect on how things changed as the 20th century dawned. Many of the remedies that were so popular in Victorian society, like sleeping draughts, electric therapies, and the elaborate bedtime rituals, gradually faded into the past. The scientific advancements that began in the late Victorian era laid the groundwork for modern sleep medicine. But the bizarre and sometimes dangerous methods remained a unique chapter in history. By the turn of the century, medical practices had begun to shift away from these eccentric treatments in favor of more evidence-based approaches to sleep disorders. While some of the odd remedies of the Victorian era are now seen as outdated or even hazardous, they were a product of their time. For the Victorians, sleep was a mysterious and elusive process, one that couldn't be fully understood with the knowledge available to them. They tried everything, from opium-laced potions to electric shocks, because they were searching for control in a world that was rapidly changing. In a way, their struggles with sleep mirrored the larger societal transformations happening around them. They were grappling with industrialization, urbanization, and the increasing pace of life. Sleep, for them, was not just a biological need, but a reflection of their place in a world that was evolving faster than they could keep up. As we move into the modern era, we see that while many of these cures have faded into the history books, their legacy lives on. Today we're still searching for ways to deal with the stresses of modern life, and the remedies may look different, but the fundamental struggles remain the same. The next time you have trouble sleeping, take a moment to consider the fascinating history of insomnia cures that came before you. From opium tinctures to electric shocks, the Victorians may have tried it all. But in the end, perhaps it was the calming influence of a good bedtime routine or a soothing cup of tea that proved most effective after all. Word count, 348.